Martin Scorsese's Casino is his 1995 gangster film starring Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci and Frank Vincent. The Las Vegas mob drama is the second gangster film in 5 years from Scorsese, who of course made the classic Goodfellas only 5 years earlier, also with De Niro, Pesci and Vincent. Goodfellas is considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest, crime film ever made. However, the response to Casino upon its release was far more mixed, with many calling it a noisy, bloated rehash of Goodfellas. Others considered it a masterpiece, and after the movie landed on home video platforms such as video cassette tapes and reruns on television, Casino slowly developed a reputation and now is considered a stone-cold Scorsese crime classic in its own right. Personally, I think the film is absolutely brilliant, one of my favourite Scorsese movies and one of my favourite crime films in general, and I think it says more about Scorsese's incredible body of work when this film, which would be considered most other film directors' magnum opus, is simply thought of as another Scorsese gangster movie. It's a wonderful film, a great gangster film in its own right, but also a cool metaphor as Scorsese's version of Paradise Lost, or even a metaphor for the Hollywood New Wave, as I detailed in a previous video. Anyway, as those who have already seen the film will know, the story concerns two friends, Sam Ace Rothstein and Nicky Santoro, who are sent by the mob to Las Vegas to make money. Though things start well, the excess, drugs, violence and politics of Las Vegas gets to everyone. There's even a toxic love triangle of sorts between the duo and Ace's wife, and after a roller coaster 2.5 hour-ish thrill run of a film, the bosses send in hitmen to take out a whole heap of people after so much heat comes down on the Vegas mob that even the bosses, safe back in Chicago, were facing time in prison. By this point, Nicky has become the boss of Vegas, running the city with an iron fist, punching and snorting his way to the top, irritating the likes of Ace with the amount of negative attention and heat from the cops and media he brings along with him. Beside Nicky is his right-hand man, Frank Marino, Nicky's main muscle, a sharply dressed, stern, strong, silent type looking character. Frank is hardly ever the centre of attention in the film, but it is a notable role. In fact, seeing Joe Pesci and Frank Vincent as a duo is possibly a nod to the fact that the two were actually a comedy duo before they were discovered and cast in Scorsese's Raging Bull. What also might be of note is that Vincent played a character called Billy Bats in Goodfellas, who is beaten to death by Joe Pesci, and in this film, he and his crew beat Joe Pesci almost to death with a bunch of bats. Yup, though he figured himself untouchable, even eventually wanting to come after the bosses, the guys at the top eventually have had enough of Nicky, and the order comes through for a hole to be dug for him in the desert. And of all the people to set up Nicky and beat him and his brother Dominic, burying them alive, is Frank Marino, Nicky's own right-hand man. It symbolises the treacherous nature of mob life, that there are no friends in this world, that after all these years, the man who was by your side, who had your back, who was in on your closest secrets, is the one who, without seemingly an ounce of remorse, mercilessly beats you and your brother to death. Now, of course, this isn't Frank going rogue. He isn't doing this of his own accord. We can assume that behind Nicky's back, Frank was sent instructions by the bosses, most likely by the head boss, Remo Gaggi himself, that Nicky needed to be taken out. And being a loyal soldier of the mob, Frankie has to do what he's told by the higher-ups. In fact, this mirrors the main plot of Scorsese's later gangster film, The Irishman, where another character called Frank is given the task of killing someone close to him. But the way he beats Dominic and Nicky is so vicious. It's arguably the most violent and disturbing scene in Scorsese's entire filmography, and with Ace telling us that the bosses were making an example of them by having them buried alive, we can assume that Frank was instructed to make the hit as painful as possible, most likely because of Nicky messing things up in Vegas and also bringing heat on the bosses. So, let's momentarily explore this minor character, take a look at Frank, and give him his own introspection, his own little The Irishman movie. Now, I say minor character, but funnily enough, Frankie is the only character in the film aside from Ace and Nicky who narrates in the movie via voiceover. It's a pivotal scene for Frank, as things are getting hot in Vegas, things are getting unruly and violent, the packages being sent home are getting smaller and smaller. As Ace tells us, it got to a point when Frankie walked into the room with the bosses, he didn't know whether he was going to be kissed or killed. When Remo pops the question, asking Frankie if Nicky has been sleeping with Ace's wife, which is considered a massive no-no, the movie pauses. And Frankie tells us that if he told the truth, Nicky, Ace and Ginger could have all been whacked, and by lying he puts himself in it, risking his own life. And this really is the crux of the issue, I feel. The longer the film goes on, the more crazy Nicky becomes, and thus the more danger Frank's own life is in. At one point, Nicky even tells Frankie that he's fucked up big time by getting involved with Ginger. Frankie is loyal enough to Nicky that he tells him that Remo was asking about him and Ace's wife, but it surely must have dawned on Frank, just as it did for Ace, just as it did for us as the viewer, that things have gone too far, and in particular, Frank's own life is in danger. Nicky might do something mental which gets Frank sent to jail, gets him killed on the job, gets him whacked by the bosses, who knows? In fact, it's possible that the bosses actually found out about Nicky and Ginger, and Remo confronted Frankie for lying to him, and told him that he had to kill Nicky as punishment and retribution for lying, and as a solution to the Vegas problem, otherwise he would be killed along with him. Having to do the deed himself was the clemency for lying in the first place. In one of Nicky's more personal moments, he confides in Frankie that he's in a bad spot, head in hand, sitting at the bottom of the stairs, Frankie leaning over him. Not exactly a great image of a mob boss. In fact, there might be something symbolic with Frankie standing while Nicky is sitting, as if this is where the dynamic changes. And Frankie realizes that for his own sake, something needs to be done, something needs to change, and he knows that no matter what, things won't end well for Nicky, and he can either be there in the hole with him or turn against him. In fact, maybe it wasn't a case of the bosses approaching Frankie, but he approaching them. Maybe he came clean to Remo, told him he had lied to him earlier, or lied again and said he just found out that Nicky did indeed sleep with Ginger and things are bad. He needs to look out for himself by this point and probably figured the way to get himself out of this hole is to cut Nicky loose. Maybe there might even be something in it for Frankie for Nicky not to be in the picture anymore. Maybe he could get upped, promoted to a higher position. The way I always saw it, there was an element of frustration in Frank, which manifested during the desert beatdown. The reason why he was so angry and ferociously beating the brothers was because he was angry with how Nicky messed everything up, how he put Frankie in danger and had him having to lie to Remo. We've all been in a situation, whether at school as kids or your parents or whatever, where you have to cover for someone and in doing so you risk getting in trouble yourself, which only makes you angry at the person you're covering for. By the time of the desert scene, Frankie is on the same page as the bosses, shouting "no more" as he repeatedly wallops his victims. Things have just gone too far, and a reset is needed. The mob is full of sociopaths, so maybe Frank didn't have any issues with turning on Nicky, but if he did, another reason for such ferociousness in the beatdown would be because in order to pump himself up and get into the correct mindset of killing someone so close to him, he would have to put all of his personal feelings for Nicky to a side and just go to town on Nicky and Dominic without hesitation. And there does seem to be a moment of hesitation, doesn't there? When Nicky says, "Leave the kid alone, he's still breathing," Frankie does take a break. I've always wondered why. A little rest maybe? Stopping to hear Nicky's pleas? Increasing the anticipation and pain by prolonging the beating? Or maybe he had a flashback to all the years he and Nicky were together, rising in the ranks, ruling over Las Vegas, a small moment of contemplation, remorse, or even regret perhaps, before common sense, logic and the rational faculty kicks in and Frank resumes the beatdown. Frank was Nicky's number 2, so he tolerated all of Nicky's crazy antics. It comes with the job description. But that doesn't mean he agrees with everything Nicky does, and the brief voiceover from Marino highlights to us that he was put in a pickle and wasn't happy with Nicky, and when the order eventually came for Nicky to go, an element of Frank may have actually been relieved, just so all the drama could be over. And also relieved, of course, that he isn't part of the whacking frenzy. Let's not forget that by betraying his best friend, by sanctioning a hit and sleeping with his wife, Nicky also proved to Frankie that he isn't trustworthy, and who knows, he could turn on him at any moment. For what it's worth, Frank Marino is based on a real-life former gangster, Frank Colota, who, funnily enough, is also in Casino in the role of a hitman. But there isn't much we can take from the real-life mobster, as Colota has said he wasn't involved in killing Tony Spilotro, the real-life Nicky Santoro. And when he told Scorsese this, Colota said that Scorsese replied, "The only reason why we're putting you into that part is because did you not tell me that it's your best friend that is going to be able to bring you to your death, not your enemy?" So it's quite similar to what Henry Hill says in Goodfellas, where he says, "See, your murderers come with smiles, they come as your friends, the people who've cared for you all your life, and they always seem to come at a time that you're at your weakest and most in need of their help." It's interesting that Scorsese would take this concept of the best friend taking out his partner and make an entire film about it, more than 20 years later with The Irishman, again with De Niro and Pesci, where in this case it's Joe Pesci's character who gives the order. So what do you think about Frank Marino? He's quite an interesting character, isn't he, when you think about it? What do you think motivated him to betray Nicky, and why do you think he carried out the beating so mercilessly? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.